So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find ourselves then studying the Aramaic English translation of the word. And this translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Yahweh, then also the Quran, then the understanding of Allah and the relationship with Ibrahim and Ishmael, where we find then the leadership of the Gentile world coming from them. And later we did understand previously that then later they're going to give the order for then the Chinese to implement their computerized system when the time comes. Until then, from the areas of understanding of Ibrahim and Ishmael, we find then the Messiah many centuries later explaining of this relationship. The situation is we never found, or we were never taught of this relationship of Ibrahim and Ishmael. Obviously the Messiah explained many areas of it, because we have only 10% roughly of the spring feast recordings. And then understanding from the time of restoration is the first understanding of then the Creator and Ibrahim and what he did from then on. So then these days where we find then the scripture where then the Messiah said, search the scripture then diligently. This is what we should do. The Messiah is implying is believe not myths. Myths are areas where people think it's true, but truly it is not. So then, let's evaluate the situation when then the people, they left Egypt. Many people, they have believed a myth. All the 10 plagues came upon the land, and then so on and so forth, and lice and frog, and then many other areas in hail, and those areas never had taken place. So then we were never taught that then Moses, when he had then the dream, in this dream he had the vision of the burning bush, because he was then previously in search of an animal that ran away from the flock, and then he was very tired. And he had taken a nap, and during the time he had taken this nap, then came the dream. In this dream he had a vision, and then the Creator spoke with Moses. So then Moses later, he visited with his brother, because during the time of his dream he had then the vision, and then he said that he was not apt to do the work. So then it was promised then Aaron, his brother, would help him with the task. So they had to take a step of faith to go to Egypt, visiting with the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was very smart. And we were given then the myth of Pharaoh being overrun. It is absolutely not true. It was a divine understanding of it, where then Moshe and Aaron under guard. They were brought in the presence of Pharaoh, and after they left the presence of Pharaoh, they were under guard. They were constantly being watched. And Moshe and Aaron, they never went out of the guard and mesmerizing his slaves. It is very naive, and there is a lack of understanding of a person during the time of these events, thinking that Pharaoh would let then Moshe and Aaron going around amongst his cheap labor. No, they were there at the palace 24/7. They were under guard. And then every day Moshe was then brought in the presence of Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh explained, what is this, Moses? You said would have this dream, and had this dream. And then he explained over and over again as a prophet. until the time the Nahashatan had to be used to get the plan in motion. Then he couldn't go anyplace else, Pharaoh. And Pharaoh then said, okay, then go amongst the people, explain your plan, and then those people wanting to go with you should go with you. Those people not having enlightenment would stay behind. Calculated then roughly 600,000 people. And the rest of them stayed. So then he began to understand a balance in the situation. And then we find that Moshe and Aaron, they did not perform any kind of a ritual with a lamb, and then having these lambs slaughtered, and then the situation of the dam placed on the posts of the shacks of the people. The whole situation is a myth. They were never taught to handle the presence of the Creator yet. So what the people had done, they had mixed up the whole understanding after the first tabernacle services. Understanding were given. Plural, because services, there were many services of the first tabernacle service. Those were a set of understandings of the service. And then when they began to record it much later, because the previous manuscripts of Moses then were destroyed, they had to rewrite it. And then they mixed up the whole situation over there in Egypt. And we have believed a myth. We truly believed. And then the walking of 40 years in a desert. Then they found there are rocks over there in the land of Israel, where there are then designs of sandals on the rocks. Many, thousands of rocks with these sign of the sandals, indicating then the Creator in a vision during the night, where then had a dream. Then any place where then your sandals they touch, then obviously they would have as a land of themselves, speaking from the Euphrates to the Nile. So then when we hear then these myths reading from the scripture, all because the people they walked 40 years on the desert, it's a myth. The reference of Moshe were then the rocks that they carved these sandals sign. And of course, the rock never wears away. And the people, then when they came up to a certain extent of the journey, they had no understanding of the mighty signs and the wonders, because they never saw them. They had to believe what Moses told them. And they came up to a certain extent of the journey, and then they cursed Moses at his face, and they turned back. They went back to Egypt. And some of them were explaining even, oh, we are so then longing for the onions and the cucumbers of Egypt. So they were already groaning and moaning. So then a lot of them returned, and they got lost in the desert. So this story of their shoes were never worn, it BS. Those were concocted myths. And we have believed as a nation, and we got our nation nearly destroyed because of it. So then what were the 40 years? 40 years had taken them the experience in a desert. The first tabernacle service experience had lasted for 40 years, or roughly 40 years. That's where to get your 40 years from. Now the people going around and then in the desert and around, and then the shoes never were worn out. It's ridiculous. It's a stupidity. So then we understand from Galah, then Revelation, where then China is going to be rich overnight. We know these because we already have the understanding from where then the third part of the ships then are going to be destroyed. We are already searching of the future from a place of the earth where most of the ships are located at. Then you'll find the leader of this trade of the end. However, this leader is going to be given the order from the first son, Ishmael, or the descendants of the sons of Ishmael, because we are during the time of restoration. Then when the okay is given, people are going only to download the system in their computers. It's going to be a radical change in the world's system only with the pushing of a switch. And then our country yet is extremely naive regarding it, because we have believed lies and myths and traditions, and we don't understand the importance of the Holy Tabernacles yet. We have not yet studied the importance of the first holy city of the time of restoration, the land of Cush. We have not yet awakening of the fact we must find the holy site to become part of the future leadership. Because apart from the true understanding of the scripture, including the Quran, starting with the Quran, then the Torah, the rest of what's known is already known. And our industry is failing, our economy is failing. And then when the new computerized system becomes a situation of overnight, then how we are going to get out of it if our system is not in line with it? And worst yet, when our monetary system then is weakened greatly, how we are going to get credit to get raw materials? And then understanding then the petroleum, then most of the sons of Ishmael, they have the control over it. You can understand what's going to be like in the future. Our country is going to be placed in a pocket, so to speak. And we go along with the same humdrum every day, and expecting this God from only God knows where. A God that does not exist to come and to help our country, where then we should have focused ourselves a long time ago. What were then the areas of the prophetic taking place when the time comes? So then our government is at a very big danger, and then we understand Germany is already removing the gold of our country, and from France. They want their gold. Started last month. Conversations of having the gold removed. Indicating then the economy is truly failing. But then the government maintains the humdrum every day without updating the system, so we won't be able to line up ourselves then when the system comes. So then how we are going to be together with other believers at times and reading junk? Then you hear those pastors, teachers, evangelists mesmerizing your brain or your brains with junk, myths. They never existed. It was a lie. And are they speaking the truth in exchange for what they have spoken for so many years in our lives?